Okay, hello, 221. This is an assignment for m2t1, and what we're going to do is if you didn't watch the whole video, that's fine. Really the part we care about is the first few minutes, but the PDF slides have the code listed. If you don't want to go with that, fair enough. We can recreate this class here if you follow along. So the idea is, let's say I did this. Let's say that I said C equals. Okay, so I've created a tuple that's got two things, so I could use that to store x and y coordinates. So why get fancier? Well, there's a few reasons. One, nothing about how I did this required it to actually have an x coordinate and a y coordinate. I could just as easily say something like this, and they're not going to be compatible. An x coordinate without a y coordinate is not a point on the screen. Again, what we're going to do a little bit later on is look at the turtle class to maybe use these points to draw some graphics. But one of the reasons we might want to create a class is to enforce a certain structure. Okay. So whenever we create a class in Python, we've got to, I could just do this. That would be a legitimate class. It doesn't do anything, but that's how if you need one line of code to get the error from not having anything here, well, you could just put pass, but that's a very useless class. Let's try this differently. Okay. Well, the reason we call it class coordinate parentheses object is we're basing it on the base object. When we look at inheritance later, we're going to look, maybe you could have a special kind of coordinate that inherits from coordinate. But right now, all of our object classes just inherit from object. We've got to define a constructor, which is the init method. Now, whenever you have a constructor, you've got to pass it self. That's just how that works. Okay. So why this? Okay, so I'm saying here, I'm calling a function. I'm calling it with a couple things. Well, the object itself. And what you'll find out, you don't have to when you call this, because you don't call init directly. You make an object. But when the method's called, it passes the object in itself. So I'm passing it, let's say, 0, 0 as my coordinates. So it's going to say within the object, okay, that self.x will be equal to 0, and self.y is equal to 0. All right, so I'm going to run this, and what you're going to see, there's no errors, that's good. When you run a file like this, and this is not something we do too often, it's loaded into memory. And I could say something like, let's say this, C equals. Okay, great. But if I print that out, it's not very helpful. It just says there's an object. It's of type coordinate. It came from the main module, which is true because we didn't name this module, so it's just main. It's the place we started. And it's at some memory location. That's not helpful to us at all. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to define stir, which will allow us to print out the object. Great. Good. So string representation, so by definition, representation is not the thing itself. So we could say this. Let's do this. I'll do it a little bit differently from how it is on the slides. Let's call it rep equals. So who's getting those values? Great. Okay. Fix my typo. And I could just say return, return all these things. But I'm just doing it to make it a little clearer that I'm making a representation. It's not going to be something we can use other than to view it. Great. So now I'll again say, and I can just hit up to get my commands and repeat them. So up and down in this console, it's pretty useful. I've created a coordinate, and now I'm going to print it. That's more like it. So now it's using the string, because when I try to print the thing, it checks to see, is there a string representation? If there is, that's great. And that's why when you print things like tuples and lists and all that, they look nice instead of looking like this weirdness here. It's because the built-in libraries provide all these things. Okay. Finally, and I'm just going to copy this because I'm cheating. No, it's just a tutorial, so it's fine to copy it. Great. What's going on here? Well, if I remember how to spell Pythagorean theorem. If you remember the Pythagorean theorem, it's something like the hypotenuse of the triangle is you take each side and square them, add them together, and then take the square root of that. So if one side is 1 and the other side is 1, well, the diagonal is 1.41. It's the square root of 2. It's not super important you understand the math, just know where that comes from. When we do a little bit more with points later, we'll look at that. But I'm saying here, I've got to pass it 2 points. And each of those points has got to be a coordinate because I need to be able to tell the x. So self x and other x, self y and other y. Okay, so I'm going to run that. We'll see if I made any mistakes. Good. Okay, so we'll say, how about this? C1 equals, we'll use 3, 4. That's good. Yeah. See what I did? That was not on purpose, but I typoed that, and because I didn't provide y, it simply won't let me make the coordinate object. So that's what I meant about making it required that you actually provide all the data. Good. Okay, print C1 and print. Look at that. That's just me making mistakes. Cool. And to make it a little more obvious what 0, 0 is, let's say this. I'll say origin equals C2. Okay? Because the origin is the 0, 0 on the graph. Okay, so now I'm going to solve for what I want to see for my answers. Now, some people would say you should write the code over here. I'm going to run it in the console just so we can see how it works. Again, for you to submit this, you're going to want to submit the code, and then you're going to want to submit a screenshot of you running the commands to show that your coordinate class prints and that you can do distances. So let's try this. I'm going to say print C distance. Forgot my closing parentheses. Fortunately, in the console, it lets you fix that. Okay. Let's see what I did wrong. Okay, well, I don't have a C. It's C1. So let's try this. C equals C1. Print origin. Print C. So if you're following along and you have the working code, this is the point at which I want to show what I'm doing. So I've got my origin and I have my point. And now I'll just go back and do, well, I'll rewrite this line. Checking that my parentheses match. And there's the answer, 5.0. Okay, so if a triangle is 3 on one side and it's 4 on the other side, it's going to be 5. That's the most common right triangle. Let's try this. I'll say C3 equals coordinate. So 1, 1. Okay, now I'll do C3 distance. And as I said, that gives me the square root of 2. So that's that functioning. Again, like I said, what we're going to do next time is we'll maybe make a list of these, or a tuple, probably a list so we can add to it. And then draw each of those points, and then use the turtle to draw lines between them to do a little graphic. But for now, that's this assignment. So you'll submit this file, submit a screenshot of this code, and that's it. Thank you very much.